Star Entertainment loses its CEO as the revelations about the casino group keep coming. It's budget day and everyone wants to know what's in it for them. A massive lockdown in China threatens supply chains and a new long-haul flight for Aussie travellers. It's Tuesday, the 29th of March, 2022. Welcome to Fear and Greed, Australia's most popular business podcast. I'm Michael Thompson, and if you joined us yesterday morning, you would have noticed that Sean Aylmer has given himself a few days off, sunning himself on a beach in Fiji. So instead, I'm joined this week by Adam Lang from the Fear and Greed team, a former CEO, now business and executive coach across a whole range of sectors. Good morning, Adam.
Good morning, Michael.
How did you enjoy yesterday's Fear and Greed? You're back today. That's a good sign.
Yeah, I enjoyed it a lot. I hope everyone listening did too.
Well, Adam, it's a very good day to have you with us for the podcast because with all of this discussion about the Star and the resignation of the chief executive, I'll be very interested to hear your take on it, having been the CEO of an ASX-listed company. We'll get to that in a minute because I just want to mention that later, stick around because a really interesting chat today with Michael Packey, the national political editor for Nine Radio. It is, of course, about the budget, but it's looking more at the politics of the budget and what it means long-term for the election campaign and what that end result might be, and really what Josh Frydenberg needs to deliver tonight in order to have some kind of impact on the polls. So it's a really good chat. We'll have a bit more to say about that later on. But, Adam, we need to talk about Star Entertainment. We've been talking about the Star Group for more than a week now because of the inquiry in New South Wales into whether the group is fit to hold a license to operate a casino. There has been revelation after revelation, and yesterday the inquiry claimed its first high-profile victim with the Chief Executive Officer of Star Entertainment, Matt Bekier, resigning from his role. We talked about Mr. Bekier last week because it was alleged that back in 2018, he was very dismissive of a report by KPMG into anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism financing systems at the casino. One of the authors of the report claimed that Mr. Bekier had criticised its contents and had even refused to make eye contact with the KPMG partners during a meeting. So this all emerged during the inquiry hearings last week. It's pretty extraordinary.
Michael, it is. It's hard to imagine even a script as rich with scandal as this one is. There has been day after day of testimony from Star employees, from bank officials, gamblers, alleging that the Star Entertainment Group sought to circumvent money laundering and cash transaction controls. Everything from knowingly dealing with a member of a Chinese triad group to putting hundreds of thousands of dollars through as payment for accommodation when it was actually spent on the floor of the casino by one high roller.
Yeah, it is really quite amazing. I wanted to ask you in particular about Matt Bekier's resignation. He took the CEO job at the Star in 2014, but yesterday he said he was taking responsibility for, and I quote, the effectiveness and adequacy of the company's processes, policies, people, and culture, as he should. He's the CEO. Now, you have been the CEO of an ASX-listed company, so you know how much responsibility the role comes with, and that responsibility is right across an organisation. So based on what we've heard at the inquiry, did Mr. Bekier have any other option?
Michael, look, technically he might have, but practically I don't think he did. These issues have been prevailing during his reign and he is responsible for them. I just don't think there'd be an appetite from investors to have him stay in the role.
All right, so then what does this mean for the board of Star Entertainment?
Well, Michael, it was only last year where we had the Crown Casino inquiry, and that was a fairly comprehensive refresh of the board that came after it. So excluding Matt Bekier, there are 8 board members. The inquiry isn't over yet, but it's already clear that there are significant issues at the group. And that pressure will come to bear on the board as well. It's worth noting that while the Star's share price is down about 5% this month, it didn't move much at all yesterday on the news about Matt Bekier. In fact, it's barely moved at all in the last week.
Yeah, that is actually quite interesting, the impact that that's had or lack of impact. Speaking of markets, just briefly, Adam, the S&P ASX 200 closed up slightly yesterday to 7,412 points. It was only a very, very small increase, less than 0.1 of 1%, but it was still an increase, and it means that the market continued a week-long run of daily gains. The big banks did well, as did the big miners. High iron ore prices and strong demand are continuing to favour Australia's reliable supply. So, not a bad day overall on the markets. We will be back in a moment, Adam, with the rest of the day's business news. All right, Adam, it is time to get excited because today is budget day, and I'm only half joking because I suspect that you would be the kind of person who would get excited about the budget papers and the opportunity to flip through them and look for exciting tidbits. Not many people, though, are talking about how big the deficit is going to be. In previous years, the size of the deficit and when the budget would be returning to surplus has really just been all anyone talks about in the lead up to it. Of course, the more practical focus at the moment is kind of what are the practical elements within the budget that's going to affect the cost of living. Because the thing to remember is that this budget is not just a budget about the economy or about the size of the economy. This is a budget ahead of an election. The government's in a pretty interesting position. The economy is going well. Unemployment is down. Unemployment is quite spectacular at the moment. Revenues are better than predicted. And in any other year, Treasurer Josh Frydenberg would be pretty confident. But the election is just around the corner. The opposition is polling very well, and cost of living pressures rapidly becoming the number one election issue.
That's right, Michael. Chris Richardson from Deloitte Access Economics said yesterday that in many ways the economy now is stronger than it has been for decades. And that's amazing in the context of what we know has been the impacts of COVID and war, supply chain disruptions, etc. So Chris argues that if you put more money back into the economy via cash handouts or cuts in the fuel excise, it will just drive up inflation and make everyday living costs higher. It's been reported that the government will commit $17.9 billion to nation-building projects, temporarily cut the fuel excise between 10 and 20 cents a litre, and make the Home Buyers Guarantee scheme permanent and expand it.
Yeah, on those big ticket projects, the Australian was reporting yesterday that there are 98 of them that will get funding tonight. Queensland is getting the lion's share of them, 43 of those new projects, upgraded bridges, railways, roads. Anyone who's driven the Bruce Highway lately will know that Queensland's roads need all the funding they can get, but there's clearly an element of politics in some of those funding allocation decisions.
And one more thing worth pointing out, Josh Frydenberg says the budget will create 40,000 new jobs. Now, remember, the unemployment rate is currently at 4% and is expected to go even lower in the next couple of months.
It really is a very good time to be looking for a job.
Absolutely.
All right, moving overseas now, Adam, and the fallout from President Joe Biden's comments about Vladimir Putin have continued. We talked about this a lot yesterday after the US president said while he was in Poland that Putin cannot remain in power. The White House was, of course, very quick to clarify the remarks, and now other world leaders are doing the same.
Yes, this time it's the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz insisting that NATO does not have a policy of regime change. The other big news out of the region in the last day or so was Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky's comments in an interview with Russian journalists. He said Ukraine would be prepared to discuss adopting a neutral status as part of a peace deal with Russia, but it would need to be guaranteed by third parties.
Isn't it interesting, Adam, that video call with the Russian journalists went ahead, considering that obviously Russia and Ukraine are at war? Moscow authorities had warned Russian media not to cover it, but it happened anyway. And particularly impressive, I thought, was the fact that Volodymyr Zelensky delivered the remarks in Russian. He is a leader who has shown incredible leadership.
Michael, I think he's been incredibly impressive under the most difficult of circumstances.
Yeah, I don't think many would disagree with us there. Now, Adam, on the Saturday edition of Fear and Greed, we talked a lot about what's happening in bond markets at the moment. And I mentioned that the main global index used to measure the performance of bonds had fallen 11% in a year, which is the biggest drop in 3 decades. It is a huge story, though the point that I was making on Saturday was that some people may not realize how much it could actually impact their super balance because we all pretty much hold bonds in our super.
Yes. Now, analysts are saying we are now entering another big bond bear market. The Bank of America says the return on US government bonds is on track for its worst year since 1949. Now, that 11% figure equates to a drop in market value of about US $2.6 trillion. Now, when we're talking about bonds, we're talking about a fixed income instrument enabling a loan made by an investor to a borrower, usually a government, but often a big business or bank. It's basically a sophisticated IOU. But I'll just mention that figure again. We're talking about a market drop of US $2.6 trillion. Quite incredible.
That really is. And I mean, that is going to have a substantial impact on investors everywhere, not just in superannuation, but I suppose that is the way that it affects most people who aren't actively engaged in investing. They may not even realize the exposure that they have to bonds through their super. And a complete change of pace. Can I squeeze in a very quick story about planes, please?
Yes, Michael, you can.
Thank you. I love this because I do just love all stories about planes and airlines and flying. But how about this? Qantas has announced it is going to begin flying between Melbourne and Dallas Fort Worth Airport from December 2nd. So later this year, but that is a long haul flight. So the Boeing 787 flights, the Dreamliner, is going to operate 4 times a week. It'll take just under 16 hours. And the return flight will take 17 and a half hours, Adam. Headwinds usually make the westbound flights a bit slower. Can you imagine wearing a mask for that entire time while you're on the plane?
Oh, that is hard to imagine.
It is quite uncomfortable, but it is great that Qantas is planning ahead and continuing to kind of open us up to the rest of the world. The flight's going to cover 14,471 kilometres, making it one of the longest in the world. It is only marginally shorter than Qantas's longest route, the Perth to London Heathrow flight. Now that is long haul.
Now, not just when you're wearing a mask, Michael, but also if you happen, like me, to be wearing glasses. That is particularly long haul.
Oh yeah, just even if you happen to have long legs, that would be very, very uncomfortable, that kind of duration on a flight. And you would run rapidly out of movies and you would have to listen to the full Fear and Greed back catalogue on that flight.
Well, that helps.
Yeah, maybe. Now, just briefly in overseas news, Adam, a big story out of China. Chinese authorities are locking down Shanghai in 2 phases as COVID cases there rise. It is a 4-day lockdown on half of the city of 26 million people, followed by a lockdown on the other half, which will also see mass testing of a very significant portion of the population. This has the potential to have a massive economic impact.
It does, Michael. So 26 million, that's basically the population of Australia. And Shanghai is a vital financial hub and a home to a lot of factories, including a Tesla production plant. This could have massive flow-on effects to supply chains around the world, which, as we know, are already under huge pressure.
And finally, Adam, I know you thought we were going to get through the whole podcast and not mention the Oscars, but we're just going to squeeze in a quick little mention. Congratulations to all the winners, especially to honorary Australian Jane Campion for winning Best Director. But hasn't it all been overshadowed by Will Smith?
It's extraordinary. I think if you haven't seen the footage, have a quick look. Chris Rock is the host, and at a point in time, Will Smith goes on stage, unrehearsed, and slaps him.
It is just extraordinary and really quite shocking on what is supposed to be a very feel-good night, and it certainly has overshadowed it. And obviously there are links to be made to business because the film industry is a very, very big business, but really we just wanted to mention that because it was just so out of the ordinary. Anyway, we've got a terrific interview for you today. Nothing to do with the Oscars. This is all about politics. It's all about the politics of the budget with the national political editor from Nine Radio, Michael Packey. We're talking to him about what the budget means for the election campaign, what it will actually take for the government to basically have an impact on the polls through the budget initiatives and whether they can make anything stick. And Michael also talks about the very real chance that the election, which is due to be held in May, could result in a hung parliament, which would be the worst possible outcome, essentially, for the country in that it delivers absolutely no certainty, which is really what business and the economy needs to thrive. But that's coming up next in the Fear and Greed playlist on your podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you, Michael.
It's Tuesday, the 29th of March, 2022. Make sure you're following the podcast and join us online on LinkedIn and Facebook. And if you haven't already, have a go at listening to Fear and Greed using your smart speaker. Just say, play the Fear and Greed podcast to whatever you're using, Alexa, Google, Siri, you name it, give it a crack. It's that easy. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was Fear and Greed. Have a great day.